I was thinking to give an introduction by introducing a personal friend of mine. His name is Friedrich Schmidt-Blick. Nearly all his professional life he has been in regulation of chemicals. And then, at the age of 55 or so, he said, oh no, let's no longer shoot at micrograms and nanograms of toxics. Let's look at the megatons, at the big, big things. This is not parts per million, it's part per part, meaning hundreds of thousands of tons around influencing our life. For instance, our weather, our climate, our mountains. He calculated that more tons of materials are moved by humans than are moved by nature. Okay, so I think it is time, after 5 decades of chemicals regulation, to really look at the big streams of materials and of energy. And now then you begin to realize that these huge masses do shape the face of the earth and actually destroy much. They are very dangerous for climate. Megatons of carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gases are altering the climate of the earth, potentially leading to huge disasters, for instance of the sea level rise, and requiring a different kind of regulation. You cannot avoid exhausts of carbon dioxide. Our breathing is carbon dioxide. This cannot be banned, but it can be controlled and can be counteracted. And then what he said in a sort of radical language is we have to dematerialize our economy by a factor of 10. And then I'm saying, okay, for materials you may be right, my dear friend, but for energy, let me stick to a somewhat less ambitious factor, a factor of 5, 4 or so, because in energy we are always confronted with the second law of thermodynamics, giving certain limits to the usefulness of energy, and then reducing energy by a factor of 10 is only rarely possible. Okay, that then converges into the philosophy of a factor of 5 of resource productivity. Now, what has that got to do with textiles? Not much at the beginning. You think, well, textiles are textiles, and if they are not toxic, we are very happy to use them. But in each kilogram of textiles, there may be a ton of water involved that has been used in all steps of manufacturing, and a ton of carbon dioxide as well, and perhaps a ton of metal ores, because for 1 kilogram of copper we need nearly a ton of copper ores. So reducing the amount of turnover that is implied when manufacturing textiles can be a demand by ecologically motivated people now and more in the future. So actually my prediction is that the almost exclusive focus on micrograms and nanograms will give way to a focus on megatons. And that means a dramatic increase of resource productivity, which is essentially my agenda and that of Friedrich Schmidt-Blake and many others. And I'm particularly happy seeing that bluesign is making resource productivity the first of its 5 characteristics of environmental caution and concern. Is in the air. We see it in climate policy, but more and more also in resource policies. The United Nations have established an international resource panel, which is also looking into the megatons of resources, including metals. And as all of our products that we are using, including textiles, have a so-called ecological footprint or an ecological rucksack, we better pay attention to that, meaning going back to the origins of manufacturing, which is the ores and the water and all that, and later the stages of manufacturing, each of them having impacts, environmental impacts, and summing up all those impacts and minimizing the negative effects can be more and more the big task for the textiles industry, and regulators will take a different approach to megatons from the nanograms. As I indicated, nanograms you can simply ban, but megatons you can't. But you can minimize the impact.
And how do you see then in the near future the supply chain evolving with all the companies?
The very term of supply chain is relatively new, although supply chains are ages old. But the very term of supply chain is relatively new, although supply chains are ages old. But the globalized supply chain is a big challenge. If, for instance, a textiles company in Europe or in America wants to tell their customers that we have a clean supply chain, what they have to do is to go down all those steps to the original manufacturing of the fibers and look at their ecological and perhaps health hazards or occupational health for the working people, and looking at each step of manufacturing is not easy. In particular, if you look at the suppliers of the suppliers of the suppliers to your textiles, it becomes quite invisible, difficult to really check. So serious companies like bluesign have to do a lot of research into the original steps, which typically remain intransparent to most. And making that transparent is quite a challenge, but more and more regulators and the broad public are demanding that information, and then it's good you have companies like bluesign to do it.